my mind and go into ceramics. I knew that I had already sort of had a lot of experience with painting, and I just felt like there was kind of more out there that I could learn, because I've always been interested in learning any kind of art thing. Like I've done a lot of it. Like I've done some metal casting, I've done, I mean, gosh, you name it, and I've probably done it at least a little bit. I've done some printmaking, painting, illustration. So yeah, I just kind of decided that I wanted to do something new, so I went into the ceramics department at KCAI, and I guess it's just kind of like happened from there. I don't know. I did it in school and I fell in love with it, and I was like very much a two-dimensional artist before that, but now I'm definitely like really addicted to the three-dimensional arts and kind of unsatisfied in my own work being two-dimensional. So that's kind of how I got into it. But I've been really lucky. I've had a chance to like go see a lot of ceramic studios kind of like around the world and participate in this sort of stuff. Like the program I did in Denmark, it's called Project Network at Gallego, and so it's an international ceramic studio, and the whole point of the program is to get ceramic artists, quote-unquote emerging ceramic artists, in touch with each other. So I think in order to do that program you have to be within like 1 or 2 years of graduation from either undergrad or graduate school. So that was pretty cool. So I got to meet a bunch of artists, like some from Germany, some from Austria, some from Finland, some from France, some from Ireland, one other American. But they're all still really good friends of mine. That was about 2 years ago that I did that. Definitely itching to do another international trip for ceramics. Okay, so now I've gotten like all of, well, I've gotten half of these done, so I'm gonna kind of smooth them out. And I don't think I want to do the other side. I don't know, I'm gonna kind of see as I go, as I smooth these out. So I'm gonna use, let's see, one of my other tools I have here. This tool, which I love, I don't know what you'd call it, just a sculpture tool, I guess. Does anybody else have any other questions, or maybe about what I'm doing, or about me, about anything?
What projects are you working on right now?
Is that Isaac?
Personal projects.
What personal projects? So right now I'm working on, well, I've been doing a lot of pet portraits for like commissioned work, and I've also been making some clay tarot cards. I'm also like trying to do an illustrated set of my own tarot cards, which have been pretty exciting. Kind of slow going though, because there's a whole lot to do, but it's also a whole lot of like stuff to go from. So it's kind of cool. So I hope that answers. What?
Like a portrait of our pet. Do we like? Can we email you on the Mattie Rhodes email?
If you want a portrait of your pet, probably just message me on Facebook. But I can do pet portraits. Or follow me on Instagram. I'm not going to plug my Instagram right now, but if you want to know, just ask me on Facebook and I'll tell you.
That's cool.
Any other questions? Also, hi Isaac, I know it was you.
Hi. Do you like clay a lot because dwarves from Lord of the Rings were created from like clay and stuff?
Yeah, that's exactly why I like clay, Isaac, because of Lord of the Rings. So I hope everybody can kind of see what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So right now I'm really just smoothing it out, and then I'm going to kind of take stock of where I want to go from here. But yeah, is everybody doing okay in their quarantine? Good. Good.
I have been doing a lot of drawing.
Good. I think it's like a great time to practice arts and do stuff that we haven't had a chance to do. So that's what I'm trying to do at home.
Well, actually, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Like for some of us that let's say, for example, that are watching you or listening to you right now.
Uh-huh.
As far as like if we wanted to try to do some clay and
Yeah.
stuff like that, where will we get the clay from? And are we allowed to like take some of these projects that we make on our own? Can we take them to you and then you would be able to fire them or something like that? Because
Sure. Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
some of us have a lot of spare time and I don't know.
So,
Maybe.
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So where I get clay is from Crane Yard Clay. It's like over off of Tracy, I think. I have a pretty close relationship with like a lot of the people there because that's the supplier we used in school. A lot of my friends work there. I mean, it's really the only clay supply in Kansas City that I can think of. I mean, you have your like regular art stores, but they have, you know, like one type of terracotta or something. You go to Crane Yard and they have like, I don't even know. I couldn't even count how many types of clay they have. So it's nice because they have a lot of options. They do student discounts. So that's really cool. They do teacher discounts as well. And we have a great relationship with them at Mattie Rhodes. So yeah, if you ever would want to get clay and make something on your own at home, you could always get a hold of me and I could definitely fire it for you. I have a couple kilns in my studio. So right now I fire my work, I fire the kids' work, and Itzel and Regina when they're doing clay projects with their kiddos, I fire their work. So if anybody also wants to do it with their kiddos, obviously that's not like what we're doing right now, but in the future, if anybody ever needs stuff fired, I have the space, and I like to fire full kilns because it just saves energy.
Cool. And also, I know that you were teaching some classes, I think. For
Yes.
adults.
Yeah. So actually we just got started teaching these classes that were really cool right before sort of like COVID got really bad. So we had done a Corazon workshop, which was really cool. Which, yeah, I think Jenny's going to grab it so I can show you guys. And we did a Sun and Moon, Soli Luna workshop that was really cool. We had really good turnouts on both of them, which is awesome because we've been kind of trying to get these workshops like off the ground for a while. And like, so now we finally have like some people who are like willing to come and like, I think really enjoying it. It's been a really good time for me.
The beer sign.
That was like years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did do a beer stein workshop a while ago, but also, you know, we're going to try and keep doing them, obviously, in different times. So these are some that we made for the workshops. This one is the one I made, and then here is the lovely Miss Jenny Mendez. She made this one, so it's awesome. I know, right? They're beautiful. So that was really cool. We had super great turnout. We're going to keep trying to do that. Just keep trying to kind of like...
And obviously, like staff can take those classes too, right?
Yeah, of course.
I was going to open on the phone. I can say it.
Oh. But yeah, absolutely. We would love to have staff. That would be awesome.
And
Huh?
And where are the workshops held?
They're at the Art Center location, but they're actually in the ceramic studio. So in my studio, kind of like in the garden. And usually we have like some beer, some wine, and we just hang out and make clay stuff. And it's usually super fun and super chill, relaxed. And it's been great.
Hey Maggie,
Hey Janie.
I was going to say that you could also offer the idea that if people wanted to, if the staff wanted to pick up any clay from you, if we have any extra clay to give them to do a project that they wanted to do at home, that then they could bring back for you to fire.
Yeah, for sure. We have a lot of clay right now, but so what I have done since I started here, I think it was started before I got here, but we've been recycling clay for the whole time that I've been here. So I have a lot of clay, but I need to recycle it. So basically what you do when you recycle clay is you have to dry it all out. So you put it on like a plaster block, so that sucks the moisture out of the clay. And then you basically have to break it up, rehydrate it, and then dry it back out to the like consistency you want. So I have a ton of clay that needs to be rehydrated because I actually got a donation from my mentor from school, a big donation of clay, but it's all super dry. So I do have some clay. Just give me a heads up. If you want some though, I can make some. I always have a batch of wet clay going in a big garbage can. So yeah, just let me know if you'd like some, and you can definitely take it home. I will warn, it's super messy, but if you're into that sort of thing, like I am, that's great. Red clay does stain. Just disclaimer.
And I have one more question.
Sure.
Just because I get questions all the time.
Yeah, what is it?
If this COVID thing goes on for a longer time, do you think that you would be able to like offer something like a class like this through the Mattie Rhodes, like what we're doing right now?
So
like,
yeah, that's
10 of us get A and stuff like that, and we're able to do something online like this.
Yeah, so that's actually something we've been in talks about, is like kind of figuring out how we can continue classes and how we can continue the sort of momentum we had going, because we had a lot of people that were coming pretty often to these classes, and I think everyone is probably pretty bored right now and could use like something like this. So yeah, we've been in talks about how to get these classes going, you know, in the time of COVID, and how we could have people either come to pick up some clay, like no contact pickup, and they could take it home, and we could do something like very similar to this where I could be instructing, and then other people could be following along from home and asking questions. So yeah, that is something we're definitely working on right now. For sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else have any questions? No? That's great.
And what you're doing right now, this is like a similar like I don't know, like technique or method that you're using that you also use for the corazon?
Yeah, so it's similar. So right now this is just a slab building technique. I use slab building actually probably more than I use any other kind of building. Yeah, so this is because I rolled out a slab and then I just cut it out. With slabs you can do stuff like make boxes, or you can make cups and stuff too. You can honestly make anything out of slabs. It just kind of like depends on your imagination. It's probably my favorite way to sculpt, and a way that I use a lot. But there's other ways too. Like you can do, gosh, you can throw on the potter's wheel, which I also do, which I'd also hopefully be offering some classes on sometime in the near future. But there's lots of ways. You can hand build. So this is kind of a mixture, I guess, of hand build and slab build, because I did kind of like build the slab by hand and not with a slab roller. So now I'm kind of just drawing a heart on the sun, because I kind of wanted this to be a mixture of the last two projects, a corazon and soul. So we're gonna do, I'm probably just gonna freehand some flames on this guy. So just gonna draw this stuff on and then add more texture and dimension. So I don't want to add more clay on top. I always could. That's not like a problem. But I kind of want to try doing a reductive process for making this heart stand out. So I'm using this tool. This is called a loop tool. It just has like little loops, you know, for lack of a better term. So I'm just going to kind of go around the heart and carve it out. So I'm carving the background out, so the heart actually will pop out of the middle of the sun. And you can use this tool for so many things. It's one of my favorite tools. So So I'm just carving it out. I'm going to do the same thing around my little flames. And again, this is terracotta. So terracotta clay is basically, okay, so basically porcelain is what's called a primary clay. And so that's, if it's a primary clay, it doesn't have a lot of other stuff in it that isn't actually clay. So basically once you get further away from primary clay, that's when you get stuff like terracotta. So this has a lot of other elements and minerals in it. This has a lot of red iron oxide in it. So what that does is it actually lowers the temperature, lowers the melting point of this stuff. So this stuff is called a low fire clay. Porcelain is a high fire clay. Same with stoneware. Stoneware can be mid-range, but so this fires to 04, which is 1,948 degrees. So it's still pretty high, but it's actually much lower than what you would fire porcelain to, which can get up to cone 10, cone 11. So it goes kind of like, our negatives are like 04, 03, 02, 01, and then it starts going up in temperature. And I can't tell you off the top of my head what cone 10 fires to, but it's very, very hot. But I don't know, I prefer low fire clay. There are different sort of things you can do with high fire and low fire clay. It depends on what you're kind of looking for. I love the color of low fire clay because it typically has more of those elements and minerals in it that that make it a low fire clay. It also adds like beautiful color in my opinion. But if you want a super stark white clay, you can get you can use super stark white clay, and that would just be probably a porcelain. But you'd need to fire it higher, so higher firings cost more money. They take longer. They're not like, you know, it's not ridiculously expensive to do a high fire, but it also depends on the efficiency of your kiln, how old it is, and how well insulated it is. So there's that. But I like porcelain too for different things. Porcelain is a lot less plastic, so when you talk about plastic and clay, that just means kind of the ability to bend before it breaks, basically. So if it's a non-plastic clay like porcelain, then I couldn't probably, and this is not a good example because this is all pretty dry, but I couldn't like bend it very well without it all cracking. And like if I did this with porcelain, it would probably just break in 2 pieces. So there's like lots of different factors. But another interesting thing is if you do a low fire clay, you have to use a low fire glaze. And you can do a lot of different things with low fire, but there are things you can't do with low fire that you have to do with high fire clay. So there's a big give and take. And it kind of depends what you're looking for and what you want to get out of it. One really cool thing I've seen people do with porcelain is a process called lithophanes, and lithophanes are actually really cool. It's porcelain in super thin sheets, and it's kind of like a reverse bas-relief. So bas-relief is like a super low relief sculpture, and you can shine light through it. So porcelain, when it's like a primary clay, is actually super, super light, or light can pass through it, especially if it's thin enough. And so if light's passing through it, it can create sort of like a light painting on the other side, and it's really cool. So that's called a lithophane. But I could never do that with a terracotta. There's way too much stuff there to block the light. Hello?
Right? Can
Yeah.
you talk about like the different type of like firing? Like you're saying low fire and high fire.
Yes.
And so like the different type of kilns.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, it's my understanding for a high fire, you need a gas kiln.
So you don't actually need a gas kiln for a high fire. You can
Okay.
use a gas kiln for a high fire. It kind of depends. So gas kilns, what I would use a gas kiln primarily for, we don't have any gas kilns at Mattie Rhodes. I fired gas kilns before. So I use an electric kiln. So basically the difference is with a gas kiln, it's actually literally lighting gas on fire inside the kiln, and so it's like this little, it's called a burner, and it like has a little tube, and it like actually has fire coming out of it. It's actually really cool to see and to look at. But so we use electric kilns here at Mattie Rhodes. They're simpler. A gas firing is a lot more complicated. What I would use a gas firing for is for something called an atmospheric firing. So an atmospheric firing would be like if I wanted to use soda or there's lots of different atmospheric firings you can do. So basically the difference, you can do an oxidation or reduction firing in a gas kiln. So with an oxidation firing, you usually get like brighter colors, and with a reduction firing, you get really deep colors. And it just depends on the way that like the chemicals and the glazes and the clay bodies react to the actual atmosphere in the kiln. So that's why it's called an atmospheric firing. So if you add like soda to a kiln, it can make these really cool like blues and greens and really beautiful stuff. And so also another thing, there's called copper reds. So copper reds, that would be like in a glaze, and you would need a reduction atmosphere to make a copper red. If you fired it in oxidation, which is the difference actually. So how you do an oxidation firing versus a reduction firing is you actually just close the holes off for a reduction firing. For an oxidation firing, you let the oxygen keep coming in from like the room outside. So yeah, we could do, I mean, not here, we couldn't because we don't have the kiln. But yeah, it just kind of depends on like what you're looking for. I personally haven't done a ton of atmospheric firings. I have, but I haven't been in charge of a ton of atmospheric firings. That was something we did a lot of in school, but my kilns are smaller than that because our studio isn't huge. Because gas kilns are typically a little bit bigger. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. Did that answer what you were kind of thinking about with that?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Other kind of fire. Oh, sorry. What?
I just wanted to share. I wanted you to share some like different type of firings.
Yeah.
And like the type of like different, bodies it will create. Like you were saying with the, if a certain type of body clay has different chemicals or different chemicals of the glazes,
right,
they will react differently to the different type of firing.
Yeah, totally differently. So other types of firing you can do what's called a raccoon firing, which is like one of my favorites. They're super fun. So raccoon firing you can like do in a backyard. Basically, you just need to like kind of make like a little homemade kiln with. I mean, I'm not recommending anybody do this at home, so let me say that. If you know how to do a raccoon firing, you can do it at home. So you just make kind of like a little like insulated area and you heat it up. And then basically you take your pots out, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a pot. It could be a sculpture, etc. You take it out while it's like red hot from the kiln, which your like little makeshift kiln, and then you stick it in something like ash or some kind of organic material that will burn. And so the burning on the surface of the clay can make really, really beautiful, interesting things. I've been a part of a lot of raccoon firings. And it can be really interesting. You can get some beautiful metallics from raccoon. You can get all sorts of crazy stuff. If you've ever seen those like really weird sort of like fractalated like looking kind of look like lightning bolts, like black lines on a pot or on any kind of ceramic sculpture, that would probably come from like horsehair on a raccoon pot. So like just like laying it down while it's super hot, and the way it burns is actually really interesting, and it leaves that impression on the pot. I was involved in probably the worst for the environment thing I've ever been involved in, kiln-wise, or what do you say, like environmental-wise, as far as firings go. I was in and I was just mostly observing, and we did a motor oil raccoon. So they used motor oil from a train, and I was still a student at the time, and so it was just like very much like, what is going on? But it was really gross. I would never do a firing like that again. It was like thick black smoke. You couldn't be outside without a respirator. It was nasty. And ultimately the results weren't very good. But there's lots of different things you can do firings with, and it kind of just depends. Also, wood firings are really fun. Wood firings are super cool. I've done some wood firings. The thing about a wood firing is you have to watch your kiln, because it's you manually who is actually deciding how hot the kiln gets, how long it stays at a certain heat, what the atmosphere is like in that kiln, and you do that by literally chopping wood and adding it as you go. So there's like hardwood and softwood, and it like depends If you want the temperature to stay steady, you'd add like a hardwood. If you want it to like increase really quickly, you'd use softwood because it burns really fast, and then so you're kind of increasing your temperature. You have dampers and stuff you can open. So in Denmark, I was a part of wood firing with like I think 6 other people, about 6 or 7. But we all took shifts, and my shift was like the middle of the night, of course, because I didn't want to have to wake up early. So I took the middle of the night shift. So there, it was probably like a 7 or 8 hour shift, and we had to. 30 minutes. Okay. How long are we going?
Jenny, how long do you want to go?
10 more minutes? Okay, so I think we're gonna do it for about 10 more minutes. This won't be done by then, but hopefully you guys will have a pretty good idea of
We can post the picture of the finished product.
Yeah, we'll post a picture of the finished product, absolutely. So yeah, with my wood firing that I did in Denmark, it's just super interesting. It's also, it's an atmospheric firing. Oh, okay, got a little bit of ripping there. Push that together. So yeah, I think wood firings are like probably the most fun, but they're also like a ton of work. It's like crazy, but they're super fun. So I would definitely do more wood firings. There's actually a wood fire conference in Estonia that I really want to go to that my friend Evelyn runs, or she's a part of running. So that's one thing I would love to do. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other firings. There are these things called snake kilns. I think they're called snake kilns or dragon kilns. I think they're Japanese, but don't quote me on exactly specifics, but they're like, they basically run down a mountainside and they're super long, and it's like you would do a wood firing in them, and it's super cool. What other kind of firings have I done? Not sure. I have to think about it. But yeah, are there any other questions about clay, about ceramics, about anything? So we're gonna go for a couple more minutes. Oh yeah. I want to get. Can I get like a board or something to sit on? I don't want it to like break. So this is not finished, but we're gonna show you a little bit. Show you what's going on with it. And Kiki is getting me a board so it doesn't break. So yeah, is anybody curious about any other firings or any other things about clay or ceramics you're just kind of curious about at all? Perfect, yeah. Just let me know and I'll do my best to answer. Can't promise I'll have the answer, but okay. So I'm just gonna try to lift this up a little bit.
Do you need help?
This should be okay. I'm just trying to get it under there. Just don't want to break it. Okay, so let me see if I can kind of hold that up. Can you guys see that pretty well? Cool.
That's cool.
Thank you. I don't know who said that, but thank you.
Isaac.
Thank you, Isaac. So yeah, any other questions? Nothing? Nothing? That's okay. Oh, okay. Okay, so actually one thing I noticed right here, there is a tiny crack. So I cannot leave a crack because a crack in clay is always going to get worse. So I'm just going to cut it off. And then I'm going to reattach it, because if you don't do that, if you ignore your cracks in your clay, then it's just going to get exponentially worse the more you leave it, as it dries out, because clay has like a little bit of a memory. The particles have a memory because the particles are aligned in a certain way. So I cut that off, so now I'm going to reattach it. And this is great because I can actually show you how you attach 2 pieces of clay. I'm going to use my needle tool to scratch it up. I'm going to scratch here. I'm going to scratch where it's going to go. I'm doing sort of like in a grid because I want the lines to be perpendicular. And I'm just going to reattach it. And then I'll probably let it dry before I move it up again because I don't want that to happen. So I don't have slip right now, but if you don't have slip, you can use water. And so when you attach, or when you scratch, when you like put all those little particles of clay up and then you add water, you're actually making slip. So if you don't have slip, you can always just use water. You just have to like be aware that you're like making your own slip as you go, kind of. now I'm just gonna use my paintbrush to clean it up a little bit. And I'll probably later add a little bit of more clay just to kind of reinforce that area, because now it's gonna be a little bit, excuse me, weaker than the rest of it. So yeah. And there are lots of different ways to do all of this. There's not like any one right way. I could have done this all like with my hands. I could have sculpted it instead of like cut it out. I could use different tools. Doesn't really matter. It's kind of just a matter of personal preference, what you're more comfortable doing. So I don't think we're gonna go too much longer. So if anybody has any questions they wanna like go ahead and ask me right now, I would say go ahead and do it, just so you can make sure you get your question in before we stop the feed. So anybody? Anyone? No?
No.
That's okay.
Do you want to talk about like the ending process, like?
Oh, what I do like after this? Yeah, for sure. So I'm gonna finish sculpting this. I'm not too far away from it, but I like to get stuff really refined. The earlier you do stuff in any clay process, kind of the better. So after that, I'm gonna let it dry out for a couple days, and then I'm gonna put it in my kiln. I'm gonna fire it at 04, which is again like 1,948 degrees. Because this is an 04 clay body, this terracotta. I think this is actually called Mesa Red. If anyone wants this specific clay body from Craynard, it's called Mesa Red, and it's beautiful. So yeah, I'm gonna fire it in my kiln. And then I have the option either to leave it, to paint it with like acrylics or like clay stain, which is like a non-ceramic material technically. If you can't put it back in the kiln, then it's like a non-ceramic material. But I could do that, or I could glaze it. So then I'd have to decide what kind of glaze I would want to use, what kind of effect I want, if I want it to be colored, if I want it to be textured, etc. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with this guy. You guys can give some suggestions if you want. See how this guy ends up being ultimately. So yeah, I'll let it dry out, put it in my kiln, fire it, and then I'll go through one more firing. And then you can do what's called like an overfire, like an overfiring. So you could do like China paint or luster, which is like actual gold or actual silver, basically, and add that on top. But I don't know if I'll do that with this. We'll see. Let me know if you want to see gold on the piece. It's expensive, but I do have some. And it's actually real gold. It's pretty cool. Any other questions before we wrap this up? Or just, Kiki, do you think there's anything else I should add? Any other?
Maybe you could just talk about the visual aspect of it, like why you made the sun.
So I made the sun because it's like kind of our symbol at Mattie Rhodes. Like we have like out on our
Logo.
On our logo, on everything. I feel like we see the sun everywhere. So I just wanted to make something that was very much for Mattie Rhodes. It can live here. Once I'm done with it, it can be Mattie Rhodes' piece. Just for you guys and for me too. So, and then I wanted to add a little bit of the other projects that I've been doing. So I added the corazon in the middle. I could always add a lot more detail. I'm not actually totally sure what it will end up like. So yeah, that's why I picked the sun. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. Yeah. All right. We good?
You can say mine, yeah.
Okay, well, I think that's it for this time. Let me know if you'd like me to do another sculpture video. You guys can give me suggestions on what you'd like to see me sculpt. I can do pretty much whatever. So, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good quarantine.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you.